Your brain receives approximately 11 million bits of information every single second. It consciously processes around 50. The rest gets filtered, prioritized, discarded. Your nervous system is constantly making decisions about what you need to know right now and what can wait. And in the fraction of a second after a bullet enters your body, your nervous system makes a decision that seems completely irrational until you understand the biology behind it. It decides you do not need to know yet. This is what getting shot actually feels like, and why the reality is almost nothing like what you have seen in every movie you have ever watched. A bullet fired from a standard 9mm handgun travels at approximately 370 meters per second. That is faster than the speed of sound. The bullet that just entered your body was moving so fast that by the time the sound of the gunshot reaches your ears, the bullet has already passed through skin, subcutaneous fat, muscle tissue, and depending on where it hit, possibly bone and organ. The entire transit from entry to final resting position takes less than a millisecond. Your nervous system, which processes pain signals at a comparatively glacial speed of roughly 1 meter per second along the slowest nerve fibers, has not even begun to register what just happened. The damage is complete before the report of the experience has been filed. This is why the most consistent and most surprising thing that gunshot survivors report is not the pain. It is the absence of pain, not initially. Survivors describe the initial sensation not as agony, but as a sudden impact, a hard punch, a shove, a pressure, something that announces itself through force rather than through pain. One survivor described it as feeling like someone threw a baseball at my chest as hard as they could. Another said it felt like being hit with a hammer. Another said he thought someone had punched him until he looked down and saw the wound. The pain comes later. In the first seconds, your brain is processing an event that arrived faster than your sensory system can report it, and the gap between the event and the experience of the event is one of the strangest and most counterintuitive things the human body does. Here is the neuroscience of why this happens. Pain signals travel to your brain through two types of nerve fibers. A delta fibers carry sharp immediate pain signals at relatively fast speeds. C fibers carry slower burning aching pain signals at much slower speeds. A bullet wound activates both, but it also simultaneously triggers your body's emergency response system, which floods your bloodstream with adrenaline and endorphins, at a rate that temporarily overwhelms the incoming pain signals. Your endorphin system, the same system that produces runner's high, the same system that heroin hijacks, activates at maximum capacity in response to severe trauma. Your body is not trying to make you comfortable. It is trying to keep you functional long enough to survive. Pain is temporarily deprioritized in favor of keeping your legs moving, your hands working, your brain making decisions. This is an evolutionary adaptation that kept your ancestors alive long enough to escape whatever was trying to kill them. In the context of a gunshot wound, it means you have a window of somewhere between 30 seconds and several minutes where you are fully conscious, fully mobile, and experiencing significantly less pain than the damage to your body would suggest. Now let's talk about what is actually happening inside your body, because what a bullet does to tissue is significantly more complex and significantly more destructive than a simple hole. When a bullet enters your body, it does not travel in a straight line through tissue like a needle through fabric. It tumbles. At high velocity, the bullet begins to yaw, rotate off its axis, almost immediately upon entering tissue, which means the wound channel it creates is not the diameter of the bullet, but significantly larger. Additionally, the bullet creates a temporary cavity, a shockwave of pressure that expands outward from the bullet's path and then collapses back, stretching and tearing tissue in a radius far larger than the permanent wound channel. Muscle tissue is elastic enough to partially survive this temporary cavitation. Liver tissue, which is far less elastic, is not. A bullet that passes through your liver without hitting any other vital structure can still cause catastrophic damage simply from the pressure wave of its passage. The permanent wound channel is what surgeons see on the table. The temporary cavity is what killed you before you got there. If the bullet hit bone, the physics become significantly worse. Bone does not absorb bullet energy the way muscle does. It shatters, and the bone fragments become secondary projectiles travelling outward through surrounding tissue at their own velocity, lacerating blood vessels, nerves, and organs that the bullet itself never touched. A bullet that hits your femur, the largest bone in your body, effectively turns your thigh into a fragmentation device. Surgeons who treat gunshot wounds describe the internal damage as consistently far worse than the entry wound suggests, because the entry wound shows you the bullet's path. It does not show you what the pressure wave and the bone fragments did to everything within a several centimetre radius of that path. Your blood pressure is dropping, not because your heart has been damaged necessarily, but because you are bleeding. The average adult human body contains approximately 5 litres of blood. Your body can compensate for the loss of roughly 1 litre, 20% of your blood volume, without catastrophic consequences. Your blood vessels constrict, your heart rate increases, your body redirects blood flow away from non-essential systems toward your brain and vital organs. You feel lightheaded. Your vision may narrow slightly at the edges. Your skin becomes pale and clammy as blood is pulled away from the surface, but you are still functional, still conscious, still capable of moving and making decisions. This is the compensatory phase of hemorrhagic shock, and it can last several minutes depending on how fast you're bleeding. If you lose 30% of your blood volume, 1.5 litres, You enter progressive shock. Your heart is now beating at over 120 beats per minute, trying to maintain blood pressure with a depleted supply. Your blood pressure is dropping despite the compensation. Your breathing is rapid and shallow. Your skin is cold and pale and sweaty. Your mental status begins to deteriorate, not dramatically, not a sudden loss of consciousness, but a progressive narrowing of cognitive function. Thinking becomes harder. Simple decisions require more effort. You're aware that something is seriously wrong, but the specifics are becoming harder to hold on to. This is your brain being rationed. Blood flow is being prioritized to your brainstem and cerebellum, the structures that keep your heart beating and your lungs breathing, at the expense of your cortex, which handles the complex thinking that is now a luxury your body cannot afford. At 40% blood loss, 2 litres, you're in severe hemorrhagic shock. Your blood pressure has dropped to the point where your brain is not receiving adequate perfusion. Consciousness is fading, not gradually now, but faster. The tunnel vision that started at the edges of your visual field has narrowed significantly. Sounds are becoming distant and muffled. The world is getting smaller and quieter and further away. Your body temperature is dropping because the blood that was keeping your extremities warm is gone, and the core is trying to conserve what little heat it has left. You are cold. Despite the adrenaline, despite the endorphins, despite everything your nervous system has done to keep you functional, since the moment the bullet entered your body, the physics of blood loss are winning. Your heart rate, which has been elevated since the moment of impact, begins to drop, not because the emergency is over, but because there is no longer enough blood volume to maintain the pressure the heart needs to beat effectively. The beats become slower and weaker. The blood pressure drops further. The brain receives less and less oxygen with each passing minute. Here is what this feels like from the inside, and it is one of the most consistently reported and most unexpected experiences in trauma medicine. It feels like letting go. Survivors who reached this stage and were brought back describe not fear in the final moments, but a profound and overwhelming sense of peace. The pain that arrived after the initial adrenaline wore off, and the pain of a gunshot wound when it arrives is real and significant, a deep burning aching pressure that is nothing like the initial impact. That pain fades as blood pressure drops and consciousness narrows. The anxiety, the awareness of danger, the desperate calculations about survival, all of it recedes as the brain loses the blood flow it needs to sustain those processes. What remains is warmth that is not real, a floating sensation, a narrowing of the world to a single point of dim light, and then nothing. Trauma surgeons describe the window between injury and death in penetrating trauma as the most consequential minutes in medicine. The difference between survival and death in a gunshot victim who is bleeding out is almost entirely a function of time, specifically the time between injury and surgical intervention to control the bleeding. The body can compensate, the body can maintain function through remarkable mechanisms for several minutes. But it cannot replace the blood it is losing, and it cannot repair the damage without help, and every minute that passes without intervention narrows the window further. The golden hour in trauma medicine is not a metaphor. It is the literal period during which the majority of preventable trauma deaths either happen or are avoided. Over 40,000 Americans die from gun violence every year. Roughly half of those are suicides. The other half are homicides and accidents. The ones who survive, and many do, modern trauma surgery is extraordinary, describe the experience in strikingly consistent terms, regardless of where they were shot or how many times. The initial impact that felt like a punch, the strange clarity of the first few seconds. The moment the pain arrived and the realization of what had happened crystallized into something undeniable. The cold that came later, and the thing that almost every survivor mentions when asked what they remember most clearly, not the sound of the shot, not the sight of the wound, not the faces of the people around them, but the silence. The strange, complete, unexpected silence of the seconds immediately after impact when the world had not yet caught up to what had just happened to it. And some of them never heard anything after that at all.